Okay, so good evening. We are going to look at chapter 8. Again, we're following sequentially in our textbook. So for the next few weeks, we'll be studying chapter 8. So we're going to look first at comunicación, then vocabulario, and then estructura or grammar. So we're going to just follow along in our textbook. And again, I'm going to point out what I think is important, what you need to know to do well in your homework and your test. So this unit begins on page 223, and it is la ropa, which is clothing, la ropa, and it's singular, okay? La ropa está limpia, the clothing is clean, okay? Or you could call it clothes. We use clothes or clothing. Sometimes you will hear the word prenda, Prenda. That also means an article of clothing, la prenda. But more usually you'll hear la ropa. And la moda is fashion. Okay, so let's take a look at this vocabulary and this area. Again, you should be familiar with a lot of these terms surrounding clothing. So let's take a look at the next page here in comunicación. And there's some, again, some slang phrases or idiosyncratic ways of speaking that they want us to learn. Again, this stuff is really for you to absorb. This will be on your test and in your homework. It's very simple, but do spend time on it and make sure you get familiar um, uh, with these phrases. Okay. So the idea here, there's some terms they give you, and many are slang. A lot of these I never use, but in different regions and countries they are used. And they're when you want to say that something is great, it's awesome, it's cool. There's different ways of doing that. One way is to say que padre, you know, uh, wow, how great. Okay. I personally don't use that, but it is used in uh, some areas. And so what they do is you can go through and listen, and they'll have people speak from different countries, and they will use these phrases, all of which mean how cool, how great. And again, there's different ways of saying this. Okay. Um, and let's move on. I'll let you spend time going through the exercise, but let's look at some of the phrases here in the box below. All right, so many of these phrases use adjectives. So again, the adjective will have a masculine or and a feminine form if it's an adjective ending in an O. And so if whatever you're saying is great or cool is feminine, it will end in an A. So if you want to say like la blusa is great, is cool, you would say que bárbara la blusa. If you were in Argentina, Chile, or Central America, there it is, Bárbara. Why Bárbara? Because blusa is feminine. If it's masculine, like dress, vestido, then you would say que bárbaro el vestido. It would mean how cool, how great. Que bien, again, you should all know that. Que brutal, this sounds a little a bit exaggerated, but que brutal again means how cool. Que chévere, this I've heard. I associate a lot personally with Venezuela. Que chévere, how cool. Que chido, chida, Mexico. Chimba is Colombia. Chulo, chula in Dominican Republic, Spain. Estupendo, stupendous. Fenomenal, fenomenal. Que fenomenal tu vestido, how phenomenal your dress. Guay, que padre, and then pura vida. Although quite honestly, pura vida, when I lived in Costa Rica, was a long time ago, but pura vida was more, if someone would ask you, ¿Cómo estás? ¿Qué tal? And you would answer, pura vida. But you could also use it, I guess, to explain that you think something is cool. Okay. Now, let's move on here. What if you don't think something is cool? And this might be on your test. They're going to ask you to identify whether the phrase means you're saying something is cool. So make sure you're familiar with them. And then what if you don't think something is cool? If you want to make a negative comment on the item, you might use aburrido, how boring, que malo, how bad, que pesado, how obnoxious, how like heavy, que pésimo, again, how obnoxious. Those would be negative ways to say something is not cool. Just be aware of those phrases. Okay, and you can go through these exercises on your own. You will see this. Now, there's one other section of comunicación, and it's using polite expressions in the appropriate context. So disculpar is the verb to excuse. So how do you say excuse me? How do you ask somebody, excuse me, please excuse me. I want to walk by you, or you bump into somebody and you say, oh, excuse me for bumping into you. I didn't mean to. How do you do this? And here are some ways. Con permiso. Con permiso. So say you might want to walk by somebody in a very narrow way and you're kind of in a hurry. You might gently say, oh, señor, señora, con permiso, con permiso. Excuse me, I'd like to get by. You could use the verb disculpar, and you can use the to form, disculpa, because you're making a command. You could use a usted command, disculpe, or if it's a bunch of people and you want to say excuse me, you would say disculpen. You should all know the command forms. The to form, disculpa, the usted formal form, disculpe, and the plural usted formal form, disculpen. You can also use perdón. So maybe you bump into somebody, you might say, ay, perdón, like pardon me, perdón. Or you can use the verb perdona and use again the commands. Perdona would be, or perdóname is the to form. If you can use the to form, that's a to command form, perdona. Or you could say perdóneme if you want to use the usted or the formal usted form. Or if you're talking to many yous, the plural you form is perdonen, perdónenme. Again, what if you want to get past or around somebody? Or say you come up to a room and that somebody's already in there, you might want to say, excuse me, do you mind if I enter? So you either want to get past somebody as you're walking along, or you want to come into, let's say, a room or an area occupied by someone else. You might use the verb pasar. And here's the verb poder. Puedo means I can or can I. Puedo pasar. Can I pass? Can I come in? And you'll use the verb pasar. You'll hear it all the time. And the person might say, sí, usted puede pasar. Okay. We would probably use enter, or can I come in, or enter. They often will use pasar. That's all. All right. And then look at this little note here. While any of the three phrases above can mean excuse me, con permiso is generally used when entering or leaving a room, to leave the table, or to get past somebody. Okay. Perdón and forms of the verb disculpar and perdonar are usually used as apologies for an interruption or an inconvenience, maybe bumping into somebody. Okay. All right. And then finally, if you want to apologize to somebody, how would you do that? You would say lo siento, lo siento. All right. Now again, here's that verb pasar, and just take a look at this. If you want to tell somebody to come on in, okay, or to pass by, you again, here are the command forms. The to form would be pasa, the usted form, that you would use with somebody that you don't know personally would be passe. And for the plural form, when there's a bunch of people involved and you want to tell them, come on in, you all, you would use passen. Okay, and take a look at some of these exercises. Just do them, spend a few minutes on these, and make sure you feel comfortable. This stuff is fairly easy and straightforward. There will be a question on your chapter 8 test on this. Very, very simple stuff. Okay, let's now go to vocabulario. Okay, so what is the vocabulary here? Okay, so the vocabulary, what vocabulary are we using? And give me a second. Okay, so this is on page 228. Now we're in vocabulary. It's clothing, and you should have had most of this. So the word for clothing or clothes is la ropa or una prenda. But again, you're going to generally use la ropa. And just make sure you feel comfortable with the clothing, that you could identify the objects of the clothing, because it will be on your exam. You're going to be asked some questions, what do you wear, or what is, what would you wear to such and such an occasion? They're going to ask you about items of clothing. Okay, so let's just take a quick look at this. And here's a little statement here in red: luce perfecto para tu entrevista. So luce means it looks like. Okay, it's the LA of conjugation of lucir. So when you conjugate it without a subject pronoun, it just means it. It looks perfect for tu entrevista. Entrevista is interview, your work interview, de trabajo. So when you go to a work interview, you're going to want to generally dress up more formally. Even in this day and age, when I was younger, definitively, things are a little more casual now. But anyway, I think it's always good to dress up. And that if I can give you any advice, if you're starting out on for an interview, if you over Zoom or wherever, I would make every effort to look my best. It's just good. It's a good investment. First impressions are very important in an interview. Okay, so let's move on. Let's look at some articles of clothing real quickly. Again, you can go through these, but the word for blouse is la blusa. Shirt is la camisa. Here he's wearing a tie. Again, you see men using these less and less, but la corbata is tie. He is wearing a suit jacket or suit coat. It's el traje. El traje. It's always good to put on a suit jacket. I tell my son, doesn't hurt to put one on when you go, if you have to go into the office or even for an interview, pop one on. Okay. Again, other articles of clothing. Abrigo would be an overcoat, okay, that you might wear this time of year. Falda, she's wearing a falda, is a skirt. Okay. El bolso is the word they're using for purse. There's other words, but go with what they teach us. Word for pants. Okay. Again, they're using it singular. El pantalón are pants, or los pantalones. You'll often hear it that way. El paraguas is an umbrella. Word for shoes is zapatos. Los tacones are high heels. Here's a young man down here wearing a gorro, a cap. Bufanda, scarf, chaqueta, jacket. Gloves are guantes. Again, look through this, but there's more vocabulary here. Again, here's again a young man with a gorra, a cap. Camiseta is a t-shirt. Vestido is a dress. Suéter is what it looks like. Los jeans or mecanicos are blue jeans. Shorts are pantalones cortos. Pantalones cortos. Glasses are lentes. Hat, sombrero. A bathing suit is a traje de baño. Here's some articles of jewelry. Make sure you're aware of these. El reloj is a watch. Pulsera, a bracelet. Collar, necklace. Anillo is ring. Make sure you're aware of these. Pendientes earrings. Calzoncillos, or calzón, are your underwear. Pijama, and pajamas. So take a look at this here. It says la última moda. I told you moda means fashion, so the latest fashion para los niños, for boys and young people, and young, los jóvenes. Okay. All right, let's move here. Okay, let's see what we've got going on here. There's some exercises you can do here on your own. And let's see. And I'm sorry, I jumped ahead a little too quickly. So after the first page of vocabulary, let's move on a little bit. Here are your colors. So you might just be aware of your colors. And remember, when you give the color of something, if you want to say the white shirt, you would say la camisa blanca. The color generally follows the noun. Okay, in English, we put it before, we say the white shirt, they say the shirt white. And again, make sure you have to adjust your colors in gender and number because they're adjectives, all right? So it's la camisa blanca, el vestido blanco. So just a basic Spanish review. Okay. Now, what vocabulary will you use when you're talking about clothing? You're going to be saying I wear. You're going to be talking about the size you wear. So what is the word to wear? It's going to be llevar. Llevar literally means to carry, but we also mean it to wear. So, ¿qué llevas hoy? What are you wearing today? And you might say, yo llevo pantalones azules. I'm wearing blue pants. Okay, yo llevo. Or we can also use usar. Usar. Yo uso pantalones azules. Or sometimes you'll hear llevar puesto. Literally, I carry on me. Puesto is poner. Puesto is the past participle. Put. Yo tengo puesto. I have put on. Yo tengo puesto pantalones azules. I literally am carrying puesto, put on me pantalones azules. But you know, llevar and usar are more commonly used, but I was just giving you another way to say to wear. Okay. And again, ¿qué ropa llevas hoy? What clothing are you wearing today? Okay, so llevar. And look through these exercises, go through them. They will again, familiarize you real quickly with some of the vocabulary. La bufanda is a scarf. Cinturón is a belt. Camisa, shirt, gorra, cap, chaqueta, jacket. Okay, let's move on here. Okay, so here again is the person. Prendas would be the clothing or things they're wearing. Accesorios, accessories, and maybe the details. What color are they or what are they like? So here's the verb llevar. Has several meanings in Spanish. Two of the most common uses are to wear and to carry. We're going to use it here in this unit as llevar, to wear, or you can use usar, as I just told you. Now, let's take a look at el cuerpo humano, the human body. Okay, the cuerpo humano, and this is on page 231. Again, look through this. You should know the parts of the body, right? So they're going to ask you on your exam, what part of clothing might you use on a certain part of your body, you know? So just make sure, what would you wear around your neck? What would you wear on your fingers or your hand? What would you, what would you wear in your head? So very easy, but just make sure when they ask you, you know what they're talking about, okay? And so they give you a few models here. Make sure you know the parts of the body. Cabeza, head. Cara, face. Mano, hand. El torso, el brazo, the torso and the arm. Cadera are your hips. Okay, so make sure you know la rodilla. make sure you know the parts of the body, and then please look through this section. Now, this part of vocabulario is very important. You will be asked some questions like this. This is using some very specific vocabulary used with clothing. All right, and up until now, we've used llevar and usar, to wear. But here's some other verbs. To try something on is a reflexive verb, probarse, literally to prove or try. To try something on is probarse. And in the present tense, it's a stem changer. The O goes to UE. And now stem changing verbs, AR stem changing verbs would never have a stem change when you use it in the preterite, as they do here. So let's look at what it says here. Me probé este vestido. I tried on this dress. Me probé este vestido. Me queda bien. Okay. So we looked at the verb probarse, is to try something on. Now, to talk about how clothing fits, use the verb quedar. Quedar. And you use quedar reflexively here. Okay. Or let's put it this way, it would be better, we'll use it, we would use the indirect object pronoun, okay, with quedar. So for yo, you use me, tú, te, él, le, ella, le, nosotros, nos, and ellos, les. So you're going to use these indirect object pronouns with the verb quedar. Now, what does quedar mean? Quedar means to stay or remain. But if you use it with an indirect object pronoun, quedar se would mean what? How does the thing fit you? How does it remain to you? Okay, so let's take a look. Me probé este vestido. I tried on the dress, and then it says me queda bien. El vestido me queda bien. The dress fits me well. Okay, or I could say me queda fenomenal, or me queda excelente. You know, it fits me really well. Here's another one. Los pantalones de mi hermano. So my brother's pants le quedan mal. My brother's pants fit him poorly. Notice pants is plural, so we have to use quedan, and we have to use the indirect object pronoun always with quedar when we want to talk about how something fits you. So le quedan mal. In this case, they fit him poorly. And then it says, están demasiado apretados. Apretado, good word to know for clothing, is tight. So take a look at this section, familiarize yourself. Notice tight is an adjective. What is tight? The pants, they're plural. And masculine, so apretados. They están demasiado. Demasiado means too tight. Here, familiarize yourself with some of this clothing-related vocabulary when you're talking about how clothing fits you or how clothing le queda. Okay, so ancho, loose. Los pantalones le quedan anchos. The pants are too loose. Le quedan ancho. Apretado, tight. Okay, that's what we had up here. Los pantalones le quedan mal, ancho, apretado, tight, corto, short, grande. Los pantalones le quedan grandes, or largos, too long, or pequeños, too small. Okay, so make sure you look at this section, because you will be asked a question on this. Okay, so again, if the pants are too large, you would say too large, you would say le quedan grandes. Or, all right, if it was his shirt, you would say la camisa le queda grande. Tweak or adjust your vowel to whatever the article is. If the article is plural, you got to make it plural. If it's singular, keep it singular. So, la camisa le queda grande, los pantalones le quedan grandes. Okay. When you talk about size of something, so the word for size in terms of clothing is la talla. La talla. It means clothing. Okay. And Argentina, I think they call it el talle, but generally it's called la talla. And so, ¿qué talla usas? What size do you wear? I'm using usar. ¿Qué talla usas? Now, for shoes, we don't use talla de zapato. We use el número de zapato. So, ¿qué número de zapato usas? What size shoe do you wear? So, please take a look at this. And then here's some just general clothing related vocabulary. Estar de moda, to be in style. I don't know, you could say los tirantes. Tirantes are suspenders. So back when I was younger, los tirantes estaban de moda. Suspenders were in style. Marca is your brand or make. Okay. Is it a polo, whatever? Okay. Is it an Yves Saint Laurent? You know, that's your marca. Take a look at some of this language and go through some of these exercises, okay? You will have a similar question like the one here on your exam. So go through this, make sure you can describe the clothing people are wearing and cómo les queda la ropa. ¿Cómo les queda la ropa? Is it too wide? ¿Les queda ancha or ancho or estrecho, too tight, etc.? Make sure you feel and look at this exercise. Okay, now we can go to grammar. Estructura. Okay, so estructura starts here on page 235. And let's take a quick look at this. There won't be a whole lot of estructura on your exam. But the first thing I want you to look at is, and I'm moving up and down here. There's one more group of irregular preterite verbs. Just one more. It's pretty minor, and it's a small quantity of verbs. If you recall, there are verbs. They have to be IR verbs. That is, they end in IR. So we're really limiting our verb the number of verbs here. And then there are IR verbs that have a stem change in the present tense. If you guys remember these, this is where the E of the stem goes to I. What were some of our verbs where this happened? Let's see if I can find them here. They do list them in your book somewhere. And if you give me a second, let's see, maybe not your, okay. So basically they appear in this first exercise here, okay, in page 235. And so let's take a look here, I'm sorry. Here are your verbs. So remember, pedir, seguir, servir, vestir. Pedir is to request or ask for, seguir is to follow, servir is to serve, vestir, very important, to dress. So these verbs in the present tense, they're all IR verbs. The E of the stem goes to I. So I request is yo pido, not pedo. I follow is yo sigo, not sego. I serve is yo sirvo, not servo. And I get dressed is yo me visto. Remember that? So these verbs are unique in the preterite. They have a unique spelling change. And here it is. Here it is. In the el, ella form, and in the ellos, ustedes form, the E of the stem goes to I in the preterite, okay? The ending is your typical ending for IR verbs. No, that's not affected. So if I want to say you requested, it would be, or he requested, it would be él, not pedió. It would be pidió. Okay, they requested would not be ellos pedieron. It would be ellos pidieron. Okay, so again, the E of the stem goes to I in the L, ella, and the ellos, ustedes form of the present. That's it. And the endings are your typical endings for IR verbs. So here it would be io, and here it's iero. That's not impacted. I'll let you look through this, and I think you're good to go on this. And there's maybe one of these verbs on the exam, but you should be aware of this, the spelling change, particularly if you're going on in Spanish. Now, there was another class of verbs that we learned. Again, they are stem changers in the present tense, and they end in IR. So, but instead of having an E in the stem, they have an O in the stem, and the one we had last year or last semester was dormir. And the O here was the stem change. It went to O-U. I'm sorry, to U-E, sorry. So it would be yo duermo, tú duermas, okay? Remember this, and the same happens with morir. It's yo muero, tú mueres, okay? So whenever you have an O stem changer that ends in IR, and you put it in the preterite, the O goes to you in the L, ella, and in the ellos ustedes form. That's it. So let's take a look. So you slept or he slept would be él, not dormió, but durmió. Okay. The ending is always io. And they slept is not ellos dormieron, it's ellos durmieron. The same for morir, it's él murió, he died, not murió. And they died as ellos murieron, not morieron. That's it. Those are the only verbs that you really need to know. And you can go through some of these exercises just to familiarize yourself with this. It's very simple. Okay. Please take a look at this section on Hugo Chavez. He was a very controversial figure. Some people he thinks that he did tremendous things for Venezuela, and many people, including many in the State Department and the people that run our country, absolutely loathe him. It just depends on your perspective, but there's a section here written on him. I will say this, that Venezuela is one of the wealthiest countries in the world, with one of the most vile, horrible distributions of wealth. Maybe that's what led him to do what he did. Whether what he did was correct, the reforms that he undertook were good or right, I will not speak on that. But it is a nation of tremendous wealth. It has some of the largest petroleum reserves on the planet, but yet maybe 60, 70% of the population lived in poverty for much of the time. So, and he made some big changes. So you might want to look through that. Okay. And then let's jump over next to the past tense, particularly the two new past tenses we have learned. We've learned the preterite tense, the simple past tense, and we've learned the imperfect tense. And so when you are speaking in Spanish or writing in Spanish about a past event, you are going to use the preterite and the imperfect on and off, and you need to know when. So you need to know, well, what exactly do they mean? We don't have to get super scientific about this. We'll keep it simple. But basically, again, the preterite is the simple past. It means that what you're talking about, it happened in the past, it's over and done with. It's final. You're speaking to its finality. Okay. Yesterday, I went to the store. Okay. It's over. It's done with. Now, what's the imperfect? The imperfect is when you're talking about something in the past, but you're describing an ongoing or a recurring action. So it means used to or were. That's the difference. So in so if I want to use the imperfect, I might say when I was young, I used to go to church on Sundays. So cuando yo era niño or de niño, yo iba a la iglesia los domingos. I did it recurrently, successfully. I just didn't go to the church one Sunday. So you're going to use the imperfect. It's an ongoing action. I used to go or I was going, okay? You might use it, for example, while I was studying, you were talking with your boyfriend. Now, what did I use there? While I was studying, you were talking. I'm using the imperfect. The imperfect is used when you're talking about a past event, and both events were going on simultaneously. So while I was studying, you were talking. So that's kind of when we will use them. So let's take a look down here. They give you a little bit here on Javier Bardem and Penelope Cruz, but in actividades analíticas, please read through this, and they will explain to you when to use the imperfect and when to use the preterite with a little bit more detail. But I want to just jump right ahead here. And here there's a little section por qué, why, and they'll go into when to use the imperfect and when to use the preterite. But I'd like again to look at some sections of the actividades analíticas, and specifically what I wanted to look at here was the in number 2. Okay, and let me see. Okay, so, and again, number 2 is what I just told you. When you're talking about something in the past and it's continuing on, it's something you used to do regularly, or you did it regularly, or it was an ongoing action, you're going to use your imperfect. So it's never perfected. It's imperfect. It was never finished. That's kind of why it's called the imperfecto. But the preterite, it has been perfected. It's over and done with. Okay, and again, read some of these examples. Okay, now, and they give you some examples. So I told you when you have two actions going on in the past simultaneously, you're going to use the imperfect. While I was studying, you were talking to your friend. What if I have a case where I have an ongoing action in the imperfect, something that was continuously going on in the action. I don't care when it ended or finished, but it's interrupted by another action. So I could say, while I was studying, the phone rang. While I was studying, you left the house. Now that second action interrupted the ongoing action. And notice it's over and done with. You left the house or the doorbell rang. That second action that's over and done with is put in the preterite. So let's take a look at the example they give us here in number 2. Enrique buscaba una camisa en la tienda. So Enrique was looking for a shirt in the store cuando Maria Elena lo vio. When Maria Elena saw him. So her seeing him, she wasn't constantly seeing him, she just saw him. It's an interrupting action, so we put it in the preterite. Here's another one. Cuando Pilar vivía en Caracas, when Pilar used to live in Caracas or was living in Caracas, it's in the imperfect, it's an ongoing action. I don't care when it began or ended, but it's in the past. Consiguió. Conseguir means to get or obtain. Notice it's in the preterite. She obtained her first job, su primer trabajo en Zara. She got her first job at Zara. So she wasn't constantly getting the job, it interrupted, so it's in the preterite tense. So when you have two simultaneous actions that are going on simultaneously in the past, and you don't care when they began or end, use the imperfect. When you have an action going on in the past, and you don't care when it began or ended, it's just a continuous action or an ongoing action in the past, and it's interrupted by something, somebody calls you, knocks on the door, leaves, sees you, that's in the imperfect. Okay. All right. Let's see. And here again, if you look at question 3, when both verbs in a sentence are in the imperfect, it means that the two events happened at the same time. Enrique buscaba una camisa en la tienda y hablaba con María Elena. So Enrique was looking for a shirt in the store and was speaking with María Elena. He was doing it at the same time. Here's another one. Cuando Pilar vivía en Caracas, when she was living in Caracas, when Pilar was living, it's an ongoing action, she was working in Zara. Now we don't use the preterite, we use the imperfect because they're simultaneous actions. So I hope you can pick up on that little bit of difference. What about the case where you have both verbs in the preterite? So you're going to have these 3 scenarios on your exam. When you have both verbs in the preterite, what does it mean? It means both actions are over and done with. That's what the preterite means. They're over and done with. And it usually means one action was consecutive or followed the other. One happened, was over and done with, and the next one happened and was over and done with. So let's take a look and forward. Enrique buscó una camisa y luego habló con María Elena. So Enrique looked for a shirt, and then later he spoke with María Elena. I'm just stating something that's over and done with. There are 2 consecutive actions that are over and done with. Okay, so they're both in the preterite. Pilar fue a Caracas y trabajó en Zara. Pilar went to Caracas and worked at Zara. Okay, these are sequential actions in the past, and they can be visualized like this. So along a timeline, one happens, is over and done with, then another one over and done with. So they're both in the preterite. Okay, so take a look at this section. Again, they go into more detail here in the next box. And on page 241, again, there's just spend a little time with this, but basically it's as we just discussed. And let's take a quick look. Enrique, this is the preterite. The preterite again means the thing's over and done with. It shows that the action was completed. It was perfected. Enrique habló con María Elena ayer en la tienda. And often you'll see words like ayer, yesterday, anoche, last night, anteayer, the day before yesterday. Those will trigger the use of the preterite because it means they were over and done with back at some point in the time. So let's take a look. Enrique habló con María Elena ayer en la tienda. So Enrique spoke with María Elena yesterday in the store. Angélica fue estudiante en la Escuela Argentina de Moda. So and Angélica was what? A student at the Argentine fashion school in 2018. It was in the past. That's what she was back then. It's over and done with. But again, the imperfect means that the action is going on over a period of time, or it's recurring in the past. It's never perfected or finished. So de niño is a trigger. As a child, Enrique hablaba mucho con María Elena. As a child, he spoke a lot with María Elena. Angélica era estudiante en la Escuela Argentina de Moda en 2018. So throughout 2018, what was she? She was a student. It was an ongoing thing throughout that year. Okay. All right. So again, take a look at these scenarios. Again, go through this. When you have the imperfect and the preterite together, the imperfect is the background action that's ongoing, it never ends, and the preterite interrupts the ongoing action. Take a look at that. Sometimes you'll have the imperfect used together, okay, twice. That just means both actions were going on simultaneously. You're not interested when they began or ended. They go on simultaneously in the background. And then finally, you're going to have two consecutive actions. One ends, one happens, it ends, then the other one happens, it ends. So they're both in the preterite, and those are two consecutive actions, okay? They're over and done with there, okay? Enrique buscó una camisa, he looked for a shirt, y luego habló con María Elena, and then he spoke with María Elena. They're over and done with. Angélica primero, and notice they're often sequenced with words like first he did this, then luego he did that. They show a sequence, or they might have the words ayer, yesterday, or anteayer, the day before yesterday, or anoche, last night. Here's one. Primero, Angélica fue. First, she was a student, and that's over with. Fue estudiante, preterite. Después trabajó en la misma universidad. Then later, she worked at the same university. And look through some of these examples, okay? Go through these. And then finally, the last section of grammatica I'd like you to take a look at here. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. And I believe we touched lightly upon this already. Where do you place object pronouns when you have an infinitive in a sentence? We learned that object pronouns like lo, la, los, las, I see it, I see him, I see her, I see them. Okay, we put those were our direct object pronouns. What about our indirect object pronouns? I gave him, yo le di el dinero. I gave him, I gave her the money, yo le di el dinero a ella. Okay, when we have indirect object pronouns, I lent them, yo les presté mi bicicleta. I lent them my bike. So we've got le or les, lo or la, los, las. Whenever we have our object pronouns, either indirect objects or direct object pronouns, where do we place them? What do we learn? The object pronoun is always placed before the conjugated verb. So I see him is yo lo veo. I saw him is yo lo vi. I saw them, yo los vi. What if we have two verbs and the second verb is an infinitive? Okay, so I want to say, I am going to see him. Two verbs. Yo voy a ver. I am going to see. Yo voy a ver him. Yo voy a verlo. I attach the object pronoun to the end of the infinitive. That's it. Okay. I'm going to give them the money. Yo voy a darles el dinero. So we can attach the indirect or direct object to the end of the infinitive when we have two verbs. That's it. So take a look at this. What if we're using reflexive verbs like vestirse, to get dressed? Okay, I am going to get dressed. I would say Yo voy a vestir me. I can also attach my reflexive pronoun to the end of the infinitive. That's it. Take a look at these examples, okay? And here they do it in number 2. Okay, now, here's an example. Es importante leerlo. 2 verbs. I attach my what? Object pronoun to the end of the infinitive. Here we have an indirect object pronoun. Es necesario darle el libro. It's necessary to give him or her the book. And again, now notice, again, you can put your object pronouns before the first verb, okay? So if I want to say, I want to have them, I could say, yo quiero tenerlos, okay? I can attach it to the infinitive when I have 2 verbs. Or what did you learn when we learned the placement of object pronouns in the past units? You can always put your object pronoun before the conjugated verb. And so you could either say yo los quiero tener or yo quiero tenerlos. But what this unit is really introducing you to is that you have an option, a placement option, a new one. When you have 2 verbs, you can attach the object pronoun, either the indirect object or the direct object or the reflexive pronoun to the end of the second verb or the infinitive. Okay. But again, you have 2 options. So please take a look at this. And I think this is pretty simple. Your chapter 8 exam, I think, is pretty straightforward. You're going to have to order some sentences in a sequence. I think it's just take your time. I think it's very straightforward, pretty simple. You're going to have to talk about from the comunicación section, what are some positive ways of saying something is cool, and then what are some negative ways of saying something is not so cool. You're going to be asked to talk about clothing, and that one picture where they're in the store and they're trying on different clothings. How would you say something doesn't fit me well? Or how would you say my pants fit too tight, or my shirt fits me it's too large? How would you say that? Okay, you're going to use the verb quedar. Okay, take a look at that. What else? Know the parts of the body and the different articles of clothing you might wear, for example, on different parts of your body. Be able to work with the preterite tense and the imperfect tense. When 2 actions are going on in the past simultaneously, both actions are in the imperfect. When one action is over and done with, and the other action is over and done with, and one follows the other, they happen consecutively, you use the imperfect. Finally, you'll have the case where one action is ongoing, it really never ends. You're not interested when it ended or began. It's an ongoing action, and then it's interrupted all of a sudden by an action. The ongoing action is in the imperfect, and the interrupting action is in the preterite. Make sure you're aware of that. You can use that. Know your placement of object pronouns. Be able to place them correctly. Okay. So if you normally we put our object pronouns before the conjugated verb. Okay, so whether it's le, los, las, les, they go before the conjugated verb, but we can attach the object pronouns to if there's 2 verbs, to the end of the second verb, and the second verb being what do you call it? An infinitive, you attach it to the end of the infinitive. So I want to read it is yo lo quiero leer, or yo quiero leerlo. I have two options. Make sure you're aware of that. You feel comfortable using those. Know a little bit about Chavez. There's that section in the book. Make sure you're aware of that. And I did want to draw your attention real quickly to something that will just make sure you just take a look at it. There's a lot of stuff in your book. Please take a look at page 250. Again, in addition to the Chavez reading, take a look at the Conéctate al Mundo Hispano on page 250, and it talks about the region Cunayala of Panama, where they make where they make molas. Take a look at the area of San Blas, and make sure you're familiar with that. And I think that you should do well on this exam. There are a few sections where you have to listen, okay, and respond. I don't think it's that difficult. And there's one small writing, okay. So let me see. There's a few areas where you have to read and do a small writing on clothing, okay, and let me see. And there is finally a section where you will talk about a time that you might have gone out to purchase some clothing, okay. You know, be able to talk about where you bought your clothing. You might have had to purchase some clothing for a special occasion. This could be hypothetical. And just write a few sentences about some clothing you purchased in the past, where you got it, what it was, how much it costs, this sort of thing. And so there is a little bit of writing on this exam. But with that, I think we are done.